Hello everyone, Vulcan here, and today I want to talk a little more in depth about Raven and what this week's episode told us about her character. Now, episode 4 of Volume 4 introduced us to Raven in truth. Now, I get that we saw her back in Volume 2 when she stepped in to save Yang's life as Nia was about to kill her, and also that scene which doesn't exist. You all know what I'm talking about, so I'm not going to mention it any further. So, on top of that, this week's episode also gives us a bit more information on Raven's and Crow's upbringing, and also sheds light on why Crow referred to her ideals as dangerous, because evidently Raven is the poster girl for Darwinism. And no, I don't mean social Darwinism, but I mean the actual raw and original version of Darwinism, because she said, and I quote, "The weak die, the strong live." That's the ideal that she lives by. So her outlook on life may well explain why she set herself the rule of only saving Yang's life once should she need it, and why apparently she didn't give two shits about Yang losing her arm when Crow mentioned it to her. My boy Del mentioned all of this in a post on Reddit, and he'll be talking about it in one of his later videos. So with that being said, it's quite clear that Raven's ultimate goal in life is simply survival and being the strongest. This feeling extends toward the tribe that raised her, that being the bandit tribe that she's now the leader of. Her motive for allying herself with the tribe and not rather with the family that she started with Tai and the hunters that she trained with at Beacon Academy, and basically not abiding by everything that was taught to her at the academy. Clearly she wasn't affected by her friends either. I think that's because of her upbringing with the tribe and the way she grew up as a bandit. And of course, the philosophy that was instilled in her since she was a child, presumably. At one point, I think she may have attempted to stick around with her new family, as in stick around with Tai and stay with her brother Crow, who decided to become a full-fledged hunter and eventually becoming part of Ospen's own inner circle. But that's a story for another time. I think the reason that she couldn't do that in the end, the reason that she couldn't simply be part of something greater than herself and the reason why she didn't see that as something that suited her was because her beliefs contrasted way too much with the core tenets that hunters and huntresses abide by, that being to fight the grim for those who can't, to protect the weak. Her beliefs, I think, created way too much friction between her and Tai, as well as all of his friends and all the other hunters and huntresses that she may or may not have had to work with at some point. But I think in particular with Tai, because she was living with him at some point, because otherwise we wouldn't have had Best Girl as a result. Eventually that led to her abandoning her family, abandoning Tai and her daughter, and go back to the tribe, go back to living the life that she always knew, living by her philosophy. I wouldn't say there's anything necessarily wrong with that if it didn't cause so much death and destruction to innocent people. But again, that's a story for another time, so I'll leave that. However, there is a theory that Chibi Reviews put out in his review, which is about Raven and her family and the potential relationship between the Brandwins and Salem. Because Raven seemed very focused on Salem throughout her conversation with Crow. And whether or not there is some sort of relationship, some kind of connection between Salem and the Brandwins, I guess that's possible, but I think what's actually happening is a lot more simple than that. Right now, Raven is standing in front of a much more fearsome enemy than she's ever encountered. I can say this with confidence because Salem is pretty much stronger than anybody that currently exists, as far as we know, within the world of Remnant. So right now, I mean, you can even see it in her expression when Raven talks about it, because in her expression, she's clearly very afraid when she's talking to Crow, even though she may try to deny it as much as she can. But I don't think she's necessarily afraid of Salem herself as much as she's afraid of the fact that now Raven is the weak one and not Salem. And Salem is the strong one, that's what I mean. So, by her own philosophy, Raven is the one who deserves to die and Salem is the one who gets to live. So, right now, that's what Raven is actually afraid of, being the one in the weak position. Another interesting thing as well that we can glean from this episode is the implied relationship that she has to Ren and Nora. Because, as I mentioned in my review, when Crow mentioned Shion, and how there is someone very strong working with Raven, Raven goes and says that she couldn't have expected the Grimm to act as fast as they did. And that's in reference to what happened in the village. Now, it's interesting that she would say that, because why would she? I mean, if it wasn't her bandit tribe that caused the destruction of Shion, then why would she, again, why would she say that? So it's pretty safe to assume that it was Raven's tribe that attacked Shion, and therefore it's Raven's bandit tribe that has some sort of connection with Ren and Nora, potentially the tribe that killed Ren and Nora's parents. But that leads to the question, what does that say about Ren and Nora themselves, and given what we know about Raven? So once again, going back to Lettergate, we know that Raven is meant to be fighting Juniper, and now that seems to be quite likely. It seems to be quite likely that there's going to be a confrontation between Raven and Ranger, given what we know about Raven and given what we know from Lettergate. But that still raises the question, why would Raven attack Ranger? Because if we assume that Ren and Nora were simply two children in a random village that was a victim of one of their bandit attacks, I don't think Raven would really have a reason to attack them now. Because under that assumption, Ren and Nora would simply have been two innocent bystanders who were fortunate enough to have lived after the events. So, by Raven's own philosophy, the fact that they were lucky enough to live means that they were strong enough to survive following the events of what happened to their family. And beyond that, you also have to consider that Ren and Nora are just complete strangers at this point with no value toward Raven's tribe. So once again, under this assumption, there's no reason why Raven would want to attack them. However, if we consider this possibility, what if Ren and Nora were also a part of a bandit clan? It's not uncommon for for two different bandit clans to be attacking each other, whether it be for spoils, whether it be for gaining manpower, or getting armament, or expanding their turfs. I mean, you see this even in real life between criminal gangs, mafia, triads, what have you. So such a thing happening, two bandit tribes going to war against each other, that's not uncommon. And Ren and Nora may have been from such a bandit tribe that was powerful enough to be a threat to Raven's own clan. And so going by that assumption, it would make more sense for Raven to have some kind of beef against Ren and Nora. And Ren and Nora themselves, well, obviously they would have beef with Raven for being part of the family that's responsible for killing their parents. But Raven attacking Ren and Nora simply because they were part of a rival gang. This rival gang, according to my theory, would have been powerful enough to be such a threat that Ren and Nora themselves would become strong enough eventually, would grow to become a threat to Raven's own tribe. And if we assume that Ren and Nora have motives of vengeance, which, to be honest, I don't see why it's unrealistic to expect that they would have such reasons to want to enact revenge, they would be a threat to Raven's tribe, and she would want to silence them before things could really get sour between them. That's one possibility. The other possibility could also be that Ren and Nora were children to hunters and huntresses who specifically fought against bandits because they knew how they operated by attacking villages and causing enough of an emotional disturbance in the village's citizens to attract Grimm. Such hunters, in order to protect people, would also have a reason to be fighting bandits, because these bandits were directly or indirectly responsible for causing the destruction of villages by the hands of Grimm. And given how hunters and huntresses are tasked with fighting Grimm, it makes sense for hunters, to me at least, to fight bandit tribes such as Ravens. And so if we also going by that assumption, then Ren and Nora would still have a reason to be fighting against Raven's bandits, because the reason they would become hunters is precisely to fight bandit tribes like Ravens in order to stop innocent people from dying from such attacks and the subsequent attacks of Grimm. There's a lot of things that are possible in terms of the relationship between Raven, Ren, and Nora, but at this moment in time, it seems a lot more likely now that a confrontation between Raven and Ranger could happen, especially considering how Raven is still in Bigambana, presumably. I know that I even said it in my previous review that she did that teleport thing that she does, so it could mean that she's somewhere else entirely at this point, but we don't know exactly how effective her teleport is. So we can still assume that Raven is in Bigambana, and if such a confrontation were to happen between Raven and Ranger, it's pretty safe to assume that Crow would be stepping in order to defend his niece, Ruby, who also happens to be there. And now, one prediction that I have regarding this as well is that if such a thing were to happen, that's when Tyrion steps in and does what he was set out to do. Because remember back to episode 1, Tyrion was tasked with retrieving Ruby and bringing her to Salem for whatever reason. If we assume as well that Tyrion was able to track down Ruby fast enough by this point, then he would also be aware that Crow is tailing Team Ranger. We don't know exactly how powerful Tyrion is, but I don't see him being any stronger than Crow, because I can see him being stronger than Cinder before she got the full maiden powers, but not that much stronger. And therefore, I don't see him being able to capture Ruby, but get out of the situation completely unscathed if he had to face Crow as well. But now that Crow would be fighting Raven, he'd be too occupied to be worrying about Ruby as she's being attacked by Tyrion, along with the rest of Team Ranger. So right now, things are looking pretty fucking scary for Team Ranger. So I'm really looking forward to that, as scared as I am to see that happening. Whether it happens in the next episode or not is really up for grabs. One thing I do really look forward to in terms of the next episode in particular, though, is seeing a more serious interaction between Ruby and Jon, considering what happened in episode 2 after Ruby realized what Jon is up to every night, training to a recording of Pyrrha, which still brings up a lot of feels in my heart, to be honest. So yeah, that'll be something to look forward to. So that's it in terms of my thoughts as far as Raven go and what her relationship between Ren and Nora is. So let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. Like the video if you did, subscribe to my channel for more, and I will see you around.